You start.
All right. I grew up in Indiana, not far from Chicago, and I grew up going to like a summer camp in Michigan, so I always knew a bunch of people here. I moved here to go to college, but like 10 years after I had graduated high school, I was in my late 20s, and I went to the community college in Grand Rapids for 2 years, and then started the mushroom farm. And so I got my associate. Well, actually, I was like 2 credits short of getting my associate of science, and started doing this, and that's what I've been doing since then.
Yeah, and I was born and raised in Crystal Falls, Michigan, and met Chris online in 2020, and moved down to, be a mushroom farmer. And when I first moved down here, we weren't really sure, because like Chris said, things were, you were up and running and going good, but we weren't sure if adding me could be like a full-time. So I thought I could fall back on nursing if I have to, and I still can, but it's been both of our full-time jobs, and we also have a few part-time employees.
A friend of mine was aware that I was interested in mushroom cultivation. I had always been interested in mushrooms and thought they were just neat. And then I bought a mushroom grow kit from Eastern Market in Detroit. I was super interested by it, and I purchased more grow kits, and I grew mushrooms indoors a few times from those kits. And then my friend sort of wanted to try and basically make a business out of it and fund a lot of us trying to kind of expand and sell them at farmers markets. And so Aaron, and he also was an accountant and wanted to start a sort of accountant and business consulting firm with some friends of his. So he rented this warehouse in Grand Rapids, and it was a really funny situation. We had like a mushroom farm and in the back, and then also a fledgling cheese distributor. Our friend Dave started a company called the Cheese People of Grand Rapids. They started in Chicago, and he worked there in Chicago for a few years, but then was doing the same thing here or in Grand Rapids. So it was the mushroom farm, the cheese guy, and then in the front there was like office space, and it was like an accounting firm and business consulting firm. And that lasted for 3 years, and when the lease was up, the business consulting firm had dissipated, and Aaron had gone into accounting full-time. He didn't have the time to do the mushroom farm thing. He's got kids and stuff, and his wife had 2 sets of twins, so he was like suddenly way too busy to be a mushroom farmer. And I thought I would lose the business, and then some friends of mine were like, hey, and those 3 years were tough. Growing mushrooms in one building, you really need to have the ability to have completely separate spaces with separate air conditioning systems, so there's no cross-contamination between fruiting rooms, which attract insects, and all your sterile work. And now we have them in 2 totally separate properties, which has been great for us. But we had tons of issues, and so I didn't have any money when the lease ended, and Aaron was doing other stuff. My friends were like, hey, we bought this house in Ionia, and it's got these partially subterranean greenhouses in the backyard. They're like built into a hillside, and they don't get much sunlight, and they stay cool and stuff, and could you grow mushrooms in them? And I did for a few years. It was really difficult, and I was doing most of it by myself. It was really hard. And so I was making the bags at home in Grand Rapids in my landlord's basement, and then driving them just 20 or 30 at a time all the way out to Ionia. I couldn't get there often enough to take care of everything. It was really difficult. So when Jess showed up, it made things vastly easier, and then we've progressed since there.
When I showed up.
Yes, it really gets serious.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I have pictures of mushroom blocks in the back of his Prius. And we lived in Grand Rapids, and we're driving them to the greenhouse in Ionia. So it was a lot of traveling and a lot of back and forth, and hard to get there to harvest in time.
In 2020 for farmers market specifically was and 2021. Those 2 years were a little bit busier than 23 and 24 were, and a lot busier than 2019 was. And so it was partially because we expanded into a bunch of new farmers markets that same year. I went from doing like I had some people that helped me with farmers markets prior to 2020, but that was all. They just worked on Saturdays. So I was doing 4 or 5, and then we started doing 8. But individual markets got a lot busier too. And even though it's calmed down a little bit, we made a ton of regular customers that we still see all the time. So we've always sold them at the farmers markets. I think probably even our first year we would sell the grow kits. And then in 2020, during COVID, mushroom grow kits were one of the hobby-like things that kind of took off on the internet. You know, everyone was making sourdough bread and growing their own mushrooms, and so people became way more familiar with the concept around that time. And then also around that time, there was a documentary called Fantastic Fungi that was released, and that brought it to a lot of people's consciousness, and that got on Netflix. And Paul Stamets, who's like the most well-known, mycologist in the English-speaking world, was on the Joe Rogan podcast. There was a ton of people who came to us to get lion's mane after they saw him on that podcast, and to talk to us about lion's mane because they talked a lot about it. And so things really took off for us around 2020. We start everything from petri dishes and like tissue cultures of the mushrooms. And so I'll grab another one too. Some of them I do in like old school glass petri dishes, and a lot of them we buy in plastic dishes like this. But whenever we get new mushroom cultures to try and grow, either I buy them from another source online, or I get them from a friend who's a mushroom cultivator. I know quite a few around Michigan, and or sometimes online we'll buy them in a liquid culture form, which is basically, this is just mycelium growing on a like nutrified agar gelatin, and this is mycelium blended up into a nutrified liquid form. So they're basically the same thing, but it gives me an easy way to purchase and buy and transport the genetics for different mushrooms. Occasionally we find mushrooms outdoors that might make good candidates for growing. So like we call this one our Michigan oyster. This bag of grain will eventually grow an oyster mushroom that a friend of mine found in the wild and I cloned a few years ago. And a lot of times when you clone wild mushrooms, they don't necessarily make good cultivars, but our Michigan oyster does. They're an exceptionally large, real meaty oyster mushroom, and they kind of smell like seafood, which not everyone loves, but it's a mild enough flavor that they work in a lot of dishes, and it just gets incorporated into it. But you can also like bread them and fry them and treat them like fish, and they taste like fried fish, and they're delicious. So we make vegetarian po' boy sandwiches with them a lot. Will eventually grow a brick cap, which is a Hyphiloma lateritium that I found out here next to our house. There's a big park next door, it's like 200 acres of oak forest, so we're super lucky. And there's all kinds of wild mushrooms to find. But so whether I find them in the wild or I purchase the genetics or trade them, we get some of the mushroom into a new set of petri dishes, and they have this nutrified seaweed-derived gelatin in them called agar. It's used in food sometimes, and it can grow all kinds of microorganisms. So I have to be really careful when I make them and do it, in front of my laminar flow hood, so I don't grow molds or bacteria. But after they colonize through the petri dish, then I sterilize a bag with like 3 pounds of grain in it. I sterilize them in these big pressure cookers that Jess got out for us here, and then open up, after they're sterilized, I open up the bags in front of the flow hood, and I take a sterile scalpel and add a few small pieces of this myceliated agar. And then they sit on the shelf for a couple weeks. I made these on 122, and they're basically done now. And the mushroom mycelium grows through the grain. Some types are slower than others, but after a few weeks, they'll turn sort of white and fuzzy and bound together with this mycelium. I break them all apart and then make another set of larger 6-pound bags of grain, and I inoculate each one of these 6-pound bags with a little bit from this grain spawn master. And then the 6-pound bags sit for a couple of weeks, and when they're done, we use like you saw me earlier, to inoculate the final fruiting substrate. And so these masters can be around for a couple of months, and after they're done growing, I put them in the fridge, and they can make a bunch of further sets of grain spawn. And so like one petri dish could, I mean, theoretically you could expand it like infinitely. You could make thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. And this one we've been growing since 2015 and have grown a good, I don't know, 10,000, 12,000 pounds of it by now.
Amazing.
So that's basically it that we do here.
Okay.
And then at the farm we just cut them open and keep them humid, and the mushrooms grow right out.
I've never seen a house this one's long like that before.
It's really great,
It is.
And it's like, it's volume based, so we figured out, we know how many pounds of water we need, but then we had to figure out, unfortunately I met an engineer who figured this out, what volume of PVC pipe basically is equivalent to the poundage of water that we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then he constructed it so each time it drops that correct volume. The bags are like around 55% water and 45% dry ingredients. Most mushrooms grow pretty happily from that.
Nice.
Yeah, so once we fill the bags, they have to expand a little bit before we can put them into the barrel. But we'll fold them by the gussets, fold out the filter, and then over. And we kind of give them a little shape so they fit into the barrel nicely.
Okay.
So then they'll turn off after 24 hours, and then we remove the insulation so that they can cool enough to where they'll be ready to inoculate.
Yeah.
A lot of the planes I've seen online use bigger water heater elements because they get it hotter faster.
Mm-hmm.
But when I used to do them in my house, it would release a lot of steam, which is just like wasted energy.
Sure.
And so I found really small water heater elements they use for like trailer water heaters and camper water heaters. I put them in here, they're only 1,000 watts, so they use a lot less energy than larger ones. But the great thing about them is they don't use a lot of excess water or heat. So I can just plug them in, no thermostat, and they get it up to close to 200 degrees, and then it stays there for 24 hours and turns off. But we have more bags in here than we've ever had in such a small space.
Yeah.
And so I have to exhaust it well, and so that caused some issues. The final fruiting substrates they're not truly sterile. They call it atmospheric sterilization or super pasteurization. And so it's pasteurization at a really high temperature, or like 200 degrees versus like 130 to 170 for normal pasteurization.
Mm-hmm.
And it kills all the mold spores and most of the bacteria, but there's some like thermophilic bacteria that can survive it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are beneficial, but other ones are not. And so when you have a low-tech operation like we do, where we're not loading our fruiting substrate into like a pressure chamber, like a giant autoclave, we do these barrels instead. We have to give them the best environment possible, because if the mushrooms grow too slowly, either from it being too cold or suffocating on high CO2, then those latent molds and bacteria will proliferate. And it took me a while to figure that out. I would sometimes have contamination, I couldn't determine why, but that's why. It's because it's always there, and you just have to try and kill as much of it as possible.
Gotcha. Yeah,
And certain like mushrooms with not as like the oysters rarely ever contaminate because they're such a vigorous mycelium.
Yeah.
But like lion's mane and chestnut, especially in the warmer months. This year we were documenting the barrels that had gone bad because of how often it was happening.
It's hard to estimate, but in the summer, a couple of periods during the summer when we had bad outbreaks, we probably had to throw away like 25% of our bags. But it would be for a few weeks, and then things would calm back down. We had a bad gnat infestation twice, and figured out a few things we can do to try and make that better in the future. Sealing off the space the rest of the way, which we'll do in the spring when we have more money, and will help a lot. And then just being a lot more diligent about checking our bags over there for gnats and keeping out gnat traps that we can use to like monitor if any start showing up. Make enoki mushrooms really long and skinny by growing them in high CO2.
Okay.
So we have to keep a lot of fresh air in here to keep our mushrooms from deforming. So we don't really have to provide them with light, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're not light dependent at all, and we have to heat in the winter and cool in the summer, but the air conditioning costs aren't that high. It's not a huge energy expenditure. The only other thing we provide them with is humidity. These PVC pipes are connected to some humidifiers I have in the other room.
Yeah.
And they put out a mist basically all the time. And then we have another humidifier back in the corner, and a 4-point here. This runs anytime fresh air is coming into the room to humidify the warm air that's going on right now. And we have warm air coming through here during the winter. So mushrooms, they're not very energy intensive compared to other crops. Even though we have to heat and air condition the space, we don't, they're super space efficient. We don't have to use farm equipment or fossil fuels, or at least minimally.
Right.
There's a little black poplar too I'm sticking over here.
Neat. This is another one I haven't seen. Mushroom.
Yeah, they're really velvety.
These two are related. They're in the genus Foliota, which means scaly, and they all have like either scales or these aren't real prominent, but Namiko get these little lumps called areolae. All the mushrooms in that genus Foliota have some sort of decoration on the cap. We used to just sell all fresh mushrooms, and that's still the vast majority of what we do. But in the last year and a half, Jess has started making tinctures, and we sell quite a few of those. And then mushroom jerky we've been making for a while, but the last few years we've had enough time to make it more consistently. And so it was something that we would just occasionally have. And now we don't have a commercial kitchen yet, but we're going to try to build one at our space in Grand Rapids. It would work well for it. And so for now we can only sell them at farmers markets that will let us sell cottage loft foods.
And then as far as fresh mushrooms, we are at farmers markets, but we also package and deliver to a couple stores in Grand Rapids. Bridge Street Market, King Muzz, Martha's Vineyard, and right in our warehouse space there's West Michigan Farm Link, and they have wholesale produce from farmers that go to that individuals can buy or that wholesale restaurants can buy. So once a week we deliver to them as well, but mostly farmers markets, but have been getting into some more retail locations.
Yeah, and we just got onboarded at Forest Hills Foods, which is owned by
Spartan Nash.
Yeah, Spartan Nash. So it allows us to potentially sell a bunch of different stores. Same thing with Bridge Street Market. It's owned by Meyer, and so we can sell at some other Meyer stores. We're just, once we get this other fruiting room going, then we'll have the capacity to kind of add some more.
So what do you think you're looking forward to most in the future of the business?
Commercial kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be nice.
It'll be really nice. It'll increase our profitability a little bit, and we'll be able to grow more mushrooms and know that we'll be able to process them and use them in one way or another. There's other products we want to do as well once we have the kitchen, like pickled mushrooms and dried mushroom mixes for soup bases and things like that,
Tempeh.
gravies. We really want to grow tempeh because it's an edible fungus, and we make it at home sometimes, and we really enjoy it. And a lot of our customers are the kind of people that would also enjoy it. Once we get through a whole summer growing here, things will be a lot easier.
Yeah, getting the second fruiting room, and also being more efficient and having more time to do other fun projects outdoors, as far as different edible mushrooms that are more rare, you don't see
Chicken
as
of the
often.
woods.
Yeah.
I really want to focus on chicken of the woods.
Yeah, I also want to try growing wood ears. I think that would be
cool.
Fun.
Yep.
Everybody always asks about morels, but morels are so hard, and
it's really challenging to scale up like a small mushroom farm, and we've been extremely, and I even before I knew Jess have been extremely lucky to have a whole bunch of things like work out for us, and so I don't know, it's I just feel really happy that I got through the like, will this end up being worth it in the long run, and now it feels like it will. So I don't know if I have words of wisdom, but it's definitely a challenge, and when it works out though, it's great.
Our website is www.mycophile.org, and we have a market calendar on there. And we also have Facebook and Instagram, and we're working on updating our website to have more recipes and better grow kit instructions, and also just more resources.
And we ship like mushroom jerky and grow kits and things like that through our online shop.
But yeah,
Check back frequently.
find us at the farmers market year round.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.